Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our live program on HIC TV, where today I'll be joined by Sister Farzana Karawali as we discuss what so needs to be discussed today, COVID fatigue and our emotional well-being. Who would have thought that at the beginning of 2020, when there were reports around the world of an emerging virus, that we would see it heading towards us? COVID-19 has disrupted every part of our lives, and there is not one person in this world that has not been affected by it in some way. We are living in times where we cannot do the simplest things in life, like visiting family and friends, coming to mosque, or even picking up a pint of milk without fear. All around the world, we have lost community members, our loved ones, to this deadly virus. So maybe now, a time for us to reflect on how we can continue to ensure that we as a community, one big family, can look after each other even more. But more importantly, having tawakkul, the trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and understanding that there are our plans and then there are our Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plans. There is no doubt that everyone is suffering from COVID fatigue in one way or the other. And so we have today Sister Farzana, who will talk to us about this and how we can improve our emotional well-being. And we will have some time for some question and answers. So please do send in your questions to the number shown on your screen. And thank you to everyone who has so far sent in questions already. So, by the way of a small introduction, Sister Farzana is a registered learning disabilities nurse, registered social worker, a holistic therapeutic life coach, and practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy. She is the founder of Inspirational Minds, a service set up within our sister Jamaat of Stanmore to support people with health, social and emotional issues. She is also the founder of Farzana Inspires Wellbeing, which offers personal development training, therapeutic coaching and other services, as well as a range of free support groups, such as for parents of children with disabilities to victims of domestic abuse. Farzana has also served as a trustee of Stanmore Jamaat for a number of years and is also the current safeguarding chair and has been for 6 years. So, Sister Farzana, this is so impressive. What amazing work you do, and thank you once again for joining us. So tell
Assalamu
us,
alaikum.
what is COVID fatigue?
Assalamu alaikum. First, I want to say condolences for the Shahadat of Bibi Fatima, and also thank you very much for inviting me. So COVID fatigue, there are two aspects to COVID fatigue. So we have the aspect in terms of the actual illness, whether that is any virus or it's COVID as we're talking about it today. But this kind of fatigue can also be in illnesses such as cancer as well, while somebody is going through treatment. And this has an impact on a person both physically as well as mentally. The other aspect of COVID fatigue is what we generally all are facing together, which is dealing with complex emotions such as loneliness, being bored, anxiety, frustration, sadness, demotivation, which is a big one, and also fear and the anger that comes from fear. But in addition to that, we have a lot of physical ailments that come as a result of the stress that's caused on our body. And this could be in relation to loss and bereavement. It could be extra stress. It could be just not knowing what's happening and when this is all going to end. So there's two aspects that we'll be looking at today, inshallah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Why do we find that some people are ignoring the risks of catching COVID-19?
Well, what we're finding is that when we first got into this, the COVID situation around March, we didn't know when this would end. So there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and then we were starting to hear about, obviously, you know, people that we were losing within our community. Again, that
Yeah.
increases the stress. And over time, it becomes like a pressure cooker. So although we got some release in the summer, and we were able to kind of ignore some of, you know, our pressures and stresses that we were having. And I say ignore because we hadn't fully recovered as such, because lo and behold, as soon as school started, everyone was worried again about catching COVID. And it's just got worse and worse in terms of by November, the stress increased. And by December now, we're really panicked at the moment in terms of the amount of losses and the amount of people that are catching COVID. Now, all of that, like I said, it's like a pressure cooker, and at some point it's going to burst. If it hasn't burst already, it's going to burst soon. And when a pressure cooker bursts, it's similar to when our behaviors start to display, because we are so stressed, we don't even have control over some of the ways we think in terms of our behaviors, our anger, our frustration. Some of us go into shutdown mode in some ways. We kind of feel, well, you know what, there's nothing much more we can do. You know, it's going to catch us anyway. Let's just live life. So it really depends what your situation is as to how you behave. And what we're finding is that at the moment it's got to a point where it's half and half. There are a lot of people that just can't cope with being at home and alone anymore. And there are people that are really worried and are actually trying to stay in as much as possible.
Okay, thank you very much for that. But following on from that, how can we motivate ourselves to follow these restrictions?
So I did a bit of research into motivation, obviously, after seeing that, you know, a lot of my clients in particular that I work with have lost a lot of motivation. And it was very interesting what I found that psychologists have looked into is something that we as a community already do. And it's something that bridges the gap between the demotivation and actually taking action. And that is an intention. And we use that. We use NIA in many different ways. And the reason why they've identified having an intention as a way to bridge the gap between demotivation and actually following an action through is because it's like a promise. It's a subconscious promise. And actually, in some ways, when you say, I will do this, it kind of energizes you already in the way you make that intention. So it's quite interesting how this is one of the things that psychologists have identified.
Okay, so we are feeling really tired right now. Why is that?
So like I said, you know, we've really gone through a lot of pressure, and what we need to do is understand how our body is impacted by this kind of stress that we've had during the pandemic. So I'm going to go into a bit of physiology, so bear with me, because that some people might understand, some people might find that a bit difficult to understand, but it's worth looking into. So our limbic system in the brain is involved with our emotional and behavioral responses, in particular in relation to our survival. So we hear a lot about fight, flight. And we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is part of the automatic nervous system. And again, that's also responsible for very stressful situations. And it releases, in that state, we have a lot of release of hormones such as cortisol, adrenaline, and things like that to kind of put us in this fight, flight, which is good for a short period, but not for the long period that we're experiencing at the moment, which is nearly a year, just under a year, to be honest. What we find when we're in this state, when our body starts to make changes, is that our respiratory rate increases. So we kind of get more kind of short, shallow breaths. Our blood vessels dilate, our digestive system completely changes. So this is why we're seeing so many symptoms like, you know, stomach trouble and things like that. Glucose level in the blood also, there's an increase in the glucose level in the blood. So if you think about all of the changes in our body, not only is our mind going through stress, but our body is also going through stress. So that is a lot of energy loss.
Yeah.
And this is prolonged in terms of worries that we may have. So we've got worries of family members that may be unwell, or family members that are alone and we can't really do much. We can't spend time with them. We have worries in relation to children and their studies, their education, examinations. And we have the worries of kind of when we're out and about, whether we're going to catch anything. And we've also got a lot of people that have lost their businesses, unfortunately, too.
Okay.
So I think what's happening there is that it's kind of, we're dipping in and out of stresses, as I've said, through the year. And we've got all these systems just continuously going and using up energy. And our mind is also using up energy. And we're also having to manage situations like working from home and things like that. So this is not really helpful in terms of, our tiredness. We're also, all of this is having an impact on our immune system. So if our immune system is really low, what we're doing is picking up all kinds of bugs and stuff. And some of us have been at home, not really been out much, maybe just popped over to the shops to pick up something very quick, masked up and wondering, well, why have I got something? Well, that's because our immune system is very low because of all this energy loss and changes within the body with hormones and stuff like that. And what we're seeing also is a lot of issues in regards to kind of immune related conditions such as fibromyalgia and things like that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's quite informative there. How is living in isolation affecting us?
I think the problem is when we're with people, we gain a lot of energy. We take for granted the fact that, just going to the shops and picking up milk actually gives us a time out of the house. At the moment, we're all stuck in the house. Some of us have got kids at home as well. We're working and all of that. There's a lot juggling. So we're not getting out to do even the small things that give us a few minutes joy, which we've not even realized. We haven't appreciated the kind of therapeutic effect of a hug, and kind of the touch of somebody. We're missing out on all of that. We're not getting that, particularly from extended family and things like that. We're missing out on expressions. A lot of our conversations nowadays are on text or phone and the occasional online conversations. And so we're really not getting the energy. If somebody smiles at us, straight away our face lights up. It's contagious. But if we're not, and if we smile back, you'll see them smile even more. It's a warm exchange of energy without even, talking to each other. And all of these subconscious ways of communicating, we're not getting. So we're not getting all the energy that we normally would. And I think the only way that we're finding communication at the moment where we can get face to face is through video conferencing. And as you know, we're hearing at the moment that we're quite zoomed out. We're getting very drained by using video conferencing as well.
Yeah. So why are we so zoomed out?
When we communicate normally, I think what we find is that we're able to subconsciously take in a lot of information where we're in a meeting or something like that, or even when we're meeting up with family. We're able to notice a lot of things, such as kind of the posture of people in the room, the tone of voice that they use, the kind of pitch that they use, the words that they're using. So we're picking up a lot of information, facial expressions, body language. And that's all very subconscious. We're not actually paying so much attention. We're able to receive that information quite easily. But when we're on video conferencing, we're not seeing any body language. We're not seeing much hand movements. What we're seeing is just facial expressions. And it's very hard in isolation to gain a lot of information from facial expressions. So you're only relying on two types of sensory input: the voice, the sound, facial expressions, and the words. And I think that in itself means that you're putting a lot of energy into trying to figure out what that person's saying. Mm-hmm. And actually, to be able to figure that out, you're constantly kind of concentrating on that person. You're not able to look away and look elsewhere and still pick up signals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think what we're finding is that with video conferencing, we also have issues with the light of the screen, sometimes the sound interference, the quality of the communication that we're having through maybe issues with internet and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cons as well to video conferencing in terms of energy drain. And I think what's more daunting is the fact that, just as I am seeing myself right now, is that we see ourselves when we're video conferencing, and that's a distraction in itself. You know, we're judging ourselves and we're judging somebody else. And again, that's even more energy drain. That has an impact on you know, how our concentration level as well, because we may not be giving full concentration to the other person, because we're obviously observing ourselves. So I think a good thing to do there would be maybe turn off the camera if you can, which obviously in my case I can't right now, but generally that would be the best way to do things, and take lots of breaks. I think instead of video conferencing, sometimes just take a call once in a while and maybe walk while you're taking a call. That will help you to concentrate more, less energy drain. In fact, with the exercise of walking, you're gaining some level of energy.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I just want to step in here with a question that we have received. So some of us have not had COVID, so why are we feeling tired all the time? How else are we losing energy to make us feel so drained? Perhaps you could explain, where is the feeling of fatigue coming from?
I think one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of my clients is guilt. There's a lot of guilt that we're facing in terms of, for example, if we're with family and friends, we're having to keep social distance. Obviously, at the moment, we're not with friends at all. But if at any point during this pandemic we've been out to see family, we have to stay apart from them. You know, we can't hug them and things like that. If we've got elderly parents that we need to look after, we're not able to visit them. Especially if our kids are in school and things like that, we can't go and see them, and we can't spend time with them and give them, you know, that the kind of touch or hugs that they need. There's guilt in relation to a lot of us that are working at the moment. You know, what do we do with our kids? So we leave them to get on with their studies. We'll kind of give them a prep talk in the morning, and then at lunchtime again of how to get on with their work, and then we just leave them. There's a lot of guilt involved there, and that drains a lot of energy. And sometimes if we've got a meeting and we just need them to just, you know, calm down, we maybe put them in front of the TV. By the end of the day, all of that kind of has an impact on us, because it's a responsibility that normally we could take quite easily, and we can't now. I think we're not giving ourselves a lot of time as well. We're not giving ourselves time to kind of fill our cup, because if we re-energize ourselves, then we can be there for everybody else in the family. Or at home. But if we're not finding that time, which is very difficult, because 24/7 you've got, you know, people around you. If you're living with a family with kids, you've got them around you till quite late. When do you actually get your time? And the other issue is you know, predictability. We don't have predictability at the moment. We don't know. I mean, you know, as we know, in November or so, we thought this is still going to improve. It can't get any worse, you know. We're having our vaccine soon and things should get better. But again, there's been a big turn and it keeps changing. So the predictability is going further and further away from us. And all of that, I think, is a drain. And actually, we also need to consider the amount of grief we're having, whether that's in terms of our health, for people that have got, you know, flus and colds and things like that, even if it's not COVID, or their current health condition has exacerbated because of the stress. And also, you know, the loss of family members as well, and not being able to be with them. All of this drains our energy, because it's emotional, but emotional energy, I feel there is more of a drain with emotional energy than there is with physical energy. And it's hard to get that back as well.
Okay, what can we do then?
I think we need to be really conscious about the kind of stimulation that we get. So we need to find ways to ground ourselves, so we're not so heightened in anxiety and stress and things like that. And one of the things is to kind of, I mean, we hear the word grounding in terms of physically grounding, which would be something like, you know, being close with the earth. So we're told that obviously, if you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, this is just off head, but if you're feeling low and depressed, it's good to go out in the morning, in the cold, in the morning dew, and barefoot walk on the grass. It's a form of grounding, you know. Obviously, reciting namaz, we use the mohar as well. It's a form of grounding for us to touch the earth. So maybe we should find ways to be in more contact of natural things like earth, you know, and grass and whatever it may be that we can manage to find. So one of those things could help in terms of, you know, helping you to feel a lot better over time. You may not see results straight away, but inshallah over time. Another thing would be to kind of form a sensory diet. So I work with a lot of people with learning disabilities, and some people with learning disabilities may have heightened anxiety, and others may be quite low. And even through the day, it can change up and down. So what we tend to do is look at what senses, you know, looking at all the senses, sight, smell, touch, all of that. What senses contribute to their low feeling and their high feeling? And from that, we try to find a sensory diet. But we also look at things like, you know, watching TV, listening to people, you know, doing chores around the house. What kinds of things heighten or lower anxiety? And from that, you need to kind of build a sensory diet to kind of balance yourself so you're not feeling that level of anxiety all the time. Another thing you can do is take deep breaths, and try and do this in a very mindful way. One thing that I do is, whilst I'm taking breaths, I recite salawat, and that really helps to kind of reduce anxiety and stress, and it helps to fall asleep as well, actually. So it's quite helpful. There's also something that I do in terms of coaching people is to ask them to actually find what emotion they're feeling. So to find the exact name. We tend to say, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling anxious. But, you know, if you go online, there is a wheel of emotions, and it lists, you know, in a wheel, lots of different emotions. And it's actually good for us to identify which emotion it is that we're feeling at that time, so we can acknowledge that emotion and we can actually do something about it. Happy, sad is very broad, and it's very hard to understand how to get you in or out of that emotion, as it were. And I'm just trying to think. I think what we sometimes need to do is, you know, like I said before, spend time on yourself. Do something, even if for 15 minutes, an hour, you know, find something that's going to energize you again, whether that's, you know, watching a TV program, having a cup of tea, but mindfully, be fully present in that. So hopefully, I think that can answer your question.
Thank you for that. So I've got another question. Earlier you mentioned 2 types of fatigue. Can you explain these?
So I think the one I haven't really talked about is the post-viral fatigue in itself. Yeah, I think I've spoken a lot about the other types of fatigue that we might feel. So like I said, the post-viral fatigue is when we've had an extended period of illness. So for example, if somebody's experienced the COVID infection, just as, you know, we're talking about that today, and it has an impact on us physically, but physically then has an impact on us mentally. And just to go through a couple of symptoms that we might feel in any kind of post-viral fatigue, it would be things like I addressed already: pain, headache, sore throat. So it's all the kind of feelings as if you're still got a cold, or, you know, you're run down, because you are run down. You've just gone through a virus that's taken a lot out of you. So you will still be run down for a very long time. You might even have, you know, thrush in the mouth. So eating and drinking is very difficult. You may even, you know, have a bit of impairment cognitively in your functioning in terms of kind of brain fog. So you can't always think clearly, or your reaction time is not as fast. Your sleep is completely out of sync and it's disturbed, and you have sensitivities to different types of stimulation, and also issues around your bowel and bladder, because like we said before, a lot of stress on yourself can have a big impact on your digestive system. So those are the kind of things that you will see. In terms of managing post-viral fatigue, because obviously we've gone into management of other kinds of fatigue, I think we need to think about having some kind of an activity management plan. So we come home from hospital, for example, we're told to rest for 6 weeks, and we're thinking, no, I can't do that. I have to get up. Or there are other people that are very unwell that just can't get up. Now, what I would say is that there needs to be some level of activity in the day, not to overdo it. And even if you're feeling very rough, still make sure that you're able to kind of get up and do a bit of activity. So what I would say is try and pace yourself, plan in advance exactly what you want to do, and just plan according to priority. So pick a few tasks a day. If it doesn't need to be done today, you can do it another day, right? But try and make a plan for the week, for example, that doesn't wear you out, and you space your tasks through the day. I think you also need to look at your kind of sleeping habits as well, and how you can kind of help yourself and gain energy through your sleep and actually sleeping well. And I know on the World Federation website, there is a video there that's worth watching in terms of sleep, and how to manage a good sleep pattern. Some people do have a lot of anxiety. I do know that a lot of people that have, come off the ventilator, or even people that have just, been in hospital for a long period of time on the CPAP mask as well. There's a lot of it's traumatic. It's traumatic seeing what you're seeing within the hospital. And it's traumatic to lose a sense of time as well. You become extremely disorientated. So with obviously the viral issue, you've also got the mental state issue as well. So you need to be looking into that. And so it's worth getting some level of support in terms of CBT, maybe, some support around anxiety issues, guilt, frustration, because you can, obviously, if you're lost and confused, you can have a lot of frustration that builds up and anger that comes out. And it's not necessarily something you mean to do, but you're in a situation where you kind of feel locked in within yourself. I think there's a lot of stuff we can do in terms of noticing our boom and bust pattern. So some days we'll feel good, we'll be booming, and some days we'll feel terrible, and that would be our bust day. So let's kind of note that and see a pattern within that, and then work with our planning according to the boom and bust pattern.
Thank you for that. Sorry, excuse me. What's involved in managing this activity?
You need to kind of look at activities. So, for example, if it's a cognitive issue, a lot of kind of mind fog, then you need to look at activities such as that kind of stimulate the brain. Now, try not to go on a computer and kind of look at activities like that. Maybe read a book, but don't overdo it. Read a page at a time, or read a newspaper, but obviously nothing that's going to distress you. You could watch movies, I guess, at a distance, so nothing too close to the screen, and try and talk to people as well. Have a conversation with people that can help you to kind of keep your mind going. You can also do physical tasks such as walking, cooking, gardening, the kind of daily chores, like I said, but do it in a way where you're pacing yourself and you're prioritizing what you need to do. What you don't want to do is make yourself a big long list of physical activities and you can't achieve it, and then you feel guilty and upset because you haven't achieved your goals. So set yourself really kind of smart goals, as it were. I think also we need to look at changing our structured routine. So if we have a particular lifestyle that we live, we need to realize that we need to change that. So we need to kind of restructure our routine, look at a really good sleep pattern. Like I said, get me time. And if there's an activity where you feel that you are losing energy, make sure you stop it. Don't continue it in any way. And if, I think, like I said before, the prioritizing and planning is key. Only do what's necessary. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So that's excellent. Thank you so much. And our dear viewers, we really hope that today's program has been useful to you. We do have some time for some question and answers. Here is one that has come in, which perhaps I might be able to answer. And one of those questions is it safe to take the COVID vaccine? I am elderly and I am not sure my body will be able to take it. I am scared. So this is a question, unfortunately, I would say neither Sister Farzana or I are really qualified to answer. We're not medically qualified. However, we have another program coming up, and that program, we've invited a vaccine consultant, and he'll be able to explain more about the actual vaccine itself. So just going on to the next question that we have received. As someone who suffers from chronic fatigue, how can one differentiate the fatigue as a result from COVID from those of more chronic nature?
I mean, if it's COVID, if you're tested, you would know that it's COVID. But I think some chronic fatigue has a lot of other issues that go with it, so pain and things like that. So it's just worth noting what the symptoms are and speaking to the GP. I think it's very hard to differentiate if you haven't been tested whether it's COVID or not, because what we're saying at the moment is that some of the signs aren't always prevalent in everyone. With the different variants. So I think that's a bit of a difficult question to answer, apologies, but I think you would need to speak to your GP, but before you do, identify exactly what type of fatigue you have, time of day, kind of make a diary of it, plan it out over a couple of days, and then obviously speak to your GP and see what they can do. If it's like an autoimmune condition, you may find other things like swelling as well and pain that's worth noting, and that would show that it's obviously in relation to the autoimmune disease.
Fantastic, thank you, Farzana. I really appreciate that. Here's another question that has just come in. What can mothers who are at home and not getting out, looking after kids all day, do to ease the pressure?
Something that I had said to a lot of parents right from the start of lockdown is, from the first lockdown, is try and build yourself a section within the house, yourself or the children, a little section within the house, decorate it up, put a tent there, put lots of pillows and make it look very cozy and comfortable, and call it a timeout space. And what you should do is tell your children that if you need time out and you're getting stressed out and you need space, then you go there. And if mommy needs space, then mommy will go there. You can make yourself a cup of tea and go there. But I think if over time, a lot of people have said to me, no, but my kids won't let me sit in that space. But what I've noticed that actually over time, children understand, and you'll find that they'll race you to that spot anyway, and they'll go and get their time out. So which gives you more space to get your time out. But another thing you need to do is be very mindful. I think mindfulness is something that can really help. So even if it is just washing the dishes, which is a chore, but washing your dishes in hot soapy water and being really mindful of the feel, the smell, the textures, engaging your senses, all of that gives you that energy boost again. Even when you have a shower, be mindful of the water, the heat, and all the effects it has on your body and how it feels. That's another way of gaining energy as well. So I think it's very hard to get me time. And I think as soon as you find that, the kids have gone to bed, don't straight away go and start doing your chores. Try and take a bit of time out, have a cup of tea, put your legs up for a little while, and automatically you will feel a level of energy, and then you get up and do your chores if you need to then.
Thank you for that. So this is just a reminder, dear viewers, that please do send in your questions via WhatsApp. The number is on your screen, 07950 230 984. Sorry, I've got the broadcasting telling me off now. Let me repeat that number, 07950 320 984. That number is on your screen anyway, so please do send us some questions. Farzana, I've got another question for you that has literally just come in. Can you suggest a food-based diet to help us relieve the fatigue we are feeling now?
Oh, no, I'm not a nutritionist. But from the little knowledge that I have, I do know that certain fruits that can kind of help us in terms of reducing toxins, like berries, are very good for us. So maybe berries, celery. What we want to do is reduce the toxicity in our body. And this is from the little understanding that I have, because like I said, I'm not a nutritionist, or a dietitian. But what we aim to do is remove toxicity from the body, not to add toxicity. So we don't want to be eating lots of sugary stuff. So try and go to, certain fruits and vegetables that can really kind of purify the blood, such as celery. I know that I have changed my diet in terms of having lots of radishes, celery, it's gone from my head, the fruit, grapefruit, pink grapefruit, and the red color, beetroot, and lots of berries. And that seems to help in terms of keeping the energy and just feeling a lot fresher.
Okay. I like all those suggestions. I'm not really a fan of beetroot, so I'll skip that one out. So we have another question here. We are stuck at home as a couple and not getting away, and this is obviously causing us stress. Can you suggest something for us?
I think you first need to, particularly if you're around each other all day, I think you first need to look at a compromise where you have time apart. Being together in one house doesn't mean that you have to be around each other 24/7 and then kind of get annoyed with each other. And it's only natural to need to have your own space. So I think first, communicate about when you will have time apart in terms of in the same house, and when you will have time together. Do activities together, and then do activities separately as well. If you've got children, I know that can add to the stress because you're constantly around somebody. So even just going out for walks, try and go out for walks at least once a day, or sit in the garden. I know we've got a lot of rain and that, but a shaded area where even you can mindfully just sit in the garden and take in and see the rain. And I think being outdoors, going for walks, and that can really help. Now you can do that together, but if you really need time to yourself and you really need to kind of re-energize yourself, then it's worthwhile going by yourself.
Okay, so we've just received another question. I feel so drained every day, but I have to be strong for my family. Sometimes I just like leaving home and taking a break for a bit, but I feel guilty. What do you advise?
I think a lot of our emotional drain is through guilt. And I think what we need to do is realize that we can't be there for everybody all the time. We're not designed for that. We've also got to look out for ourselves and our own health. And if you don't look out for your own me time and re-energize yourself, then you're not going to be able to give your family 100%. So what you need to do is get yourself in a balance where you do get me time, enough that you're kind of feeling your energy levels go up. Like I said, whether that's even initially you don't have to leave the house, even that's if you have a longer shower than usual, or you actually go upstairs, close the door, and have a cup of tea and a biscuit. Just make sure that you get some time for yourself. And I don't think there's any reason to feel guilty about going out for a walk. You're not doing anything. You can even take your kids for a walk sometimes as well, and then say, well, mommy needs to go herself today. But I think taking that time out will re-energize you, and then you may not feel as guilty. A lot of guilt steps in when you're feeling very low as well. So re-energize yourself. You can give your family 100% then, and then when you leave the house to go for a walk or take a break, you won't feel as bad, inshallah.
Okay, thank you. Another question that's just come in. I agree with everything that you have said. It really is brilliant advice. But I feel so hopeless. I can't even get started to doing some of the things that you have advised. How can I go about this? What can I do?
So if you're struggling to motivate yourself, it might be worth speaking to somebody, maybe a family member, maybe a friend, maybe a coach, anyone that you're able to trust, and sit with them and tell them what you're struggling with and why you're demotivated. I think, again, it goes back to the planning and being realistic with your plans and prioritizing what needs to be done. And if you can do that with somebody else, because I know, you know, especially when you're so demotivated, it feels like a brain fog and it's very hard to identify things. So a way that I would identify what's a priority for me would be to do spider diagrams. I absolutely love doing spider diagrams because you can just keep adding to them. So you can start them at night and say, these are the things that I need to do. And again, when you wake up in the morning, add to it and expand your spider diagram according to the different categories of what you need to do. And then call somebody up and say, look, I'm stuck. There's all these things that I found that I need to do. I'm just not able to manage. How can I do this? Can we work together on this? You know, I think sometimes it's hard for us to think for ourselves when we don't have that clarity and we're feeling very run down. So definitely reach out to somebody and try and make a plan with them, and just start with very small tasks and then increase them. What you don't want to do, again, like I said before, is go through this boom and bust stage where you kind of feel, oh, I can do all that. And you do it all, and because you didn't do it, you feel really bad the next day that actually I didn't manage to achieve it all. Start with one, then add another task and kind of increase it slowly through the weeks. It doesn't have to be, you know, all in one go. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so is there a sensory diet for adults too? Does it help with fatigue?
A sensory diet can help anyone, but the thing is that you need to be able to understand what is draining you in terms of the five senses. You know, how can I explain? It's very hard to explain. It's a lot easier to do it one-to-one. It might be worth kind of Googling online to see an explanation, because it's something that I do on a regular basis. So it just kind of, I can identify things straight away, but you need to look at your five senses, your sense of smell. You know, there might be certain things that you find you don't like to smell. It makes you, you know, cringe. A lot of people that I've spoken to have issues with certain textures. So I know there was one person that I've spoken to that had an issue with velvet and couldn't touch velvet. So it's worth removing things that trouble you and make you, you know, feel anxious, and bring in things that make you feel happy, but to cause a balance. Now that could be through food. It could be through the taste of food. It could be through, you know, some of the chores, the feeling that you get in doing some of the chores. But you need to identify this. So I think that primarily make a diary, sorry, of the things that you feel affect you and make you feel low in the day, the activities, the tasks, the sensations that you get from them, a bit like a journal, and the things that make you feel good. And then you need to look at a balance between the things that make you feel good and the things that make you feel bad that you still have to do for whatever reason. And you need to look at how you can change those. Now, part of the sensory diet also looks at, you know, the me time in terms of textures and feelings and smells that make you feel good. You put them on in the house, like aromatherapy. You know, we're using a lot of kind of, you know, textures like, you know, fake fur and puffy cushions and lots of color in the house and things like that. All of that can create a nice warm environment that may be helpful within a sensory diet as well. You know, certain types of lighting. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider when looking at a sensory diet, but it can help anyone.
Okay, thank you for that. I think this is probably a good time to say that this will be our last question. Perhaps, I suppose as a nurse you might be able to advise us on this. Do energy drinks actually help us to re-energize? I mean, I know it does. I drink a lot of coffee and, you know, the odd energy drink here and there, but I always find for myself that I'll get that sort of high feeling for a little while, and then that's it. I've gone totally down, and I'm ready for a nap.
Definitely. So you don't want to again, this is part of a sensory diet. You don't want to overstimulate yourself with the amount of caffeine and the amount of sugar that's in the energy drinks that you might have, because you're going to get the bust. So you'll get the boom through the energizing, and then you'll get the bust the next day. I think one thing that we really need to look at is getting a good sleep pattern. And I know I'm struggling with that at the moment, trying to fit everything in. but we really do need to be more disciplined. So do make sure that you go to the World Federation website and look at the video that's there on sleep. I found that very helpful to hand out to people that were, having trouble with sleep. Make sure you sleep, you eat well. I think stay away from the energy drinks. Instead, kind of supplement it with maybe some smoothies, but not totally fruit based again, because of the sugar that will give you the boom in, first, and then you might then feel a bit of a bust again later. So, put a few vegetables in there, like I said, celery and things like that, that will balance, or kale or things like that, into a smoothie that can help at midday. And if you're having lots of coffees and teas, try and kind of plan them out through the day, and try and push yourself a little bit further before you drink that next cup of tea. And in between, make sure you drink lots of water, lots of clear fluids.
Thank you so much for that. It's a bit of a food for thought for me as well. So really appreciate that. My dear viewers, unfortunately, this is all we have time for. But let us just take a moment to look back and think of how many people we have lost in our community. Part of me wonders, when we can all come back to mosque, the number of empty spaces that will no longer be occupied. And this is why we must take every precaution that we can to ensure that we all remain protected. For those of you who are local, you'll be aware that we have a COVID task force that looks after our elderly and vulnerable, catering for anything from emotional to physical needs. I encourage you to get in touch with us if you need us in any way, and we will do everything that we can to support you during this very difficult time. This is also open to the wider community, and we have a strong team that will continue to support you the best that we can. Sister Farzana, I take this opportunity on behalf of HIC Peterborough to sincerely thank you for joining us and giving us inspiration and coping mechanisms to continue to look after our well-being. May the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly.